When I began to reflect on this theme of family, my mind immediately turned to those many examples in the Gospels and throughout our scriptures of those who became included and welcomed into God's community. I thought of the beggars made destitute through sickness and disease, whose place was restored through the miraculous touch of Jesus' healing hand. I thought of the outcast stranger drawing water at the well, a woman from the despised race of Samaritans who became mesmerized by Jesus' great words of eternal life and whose belief in him connected her again with her people. But my mind rested on a man who would not be described as poor and disadvantaged. Some might say he'd landed on his feet, he'd learned how to make the best of difficult circumstances, and he'd become wealthy through his endeavours. But for all his prosperity and privilege, he'd become despised in the eyes of the community because he was seen as a collaborator with the detested powers of Rome through his willingness to act as their tax collector. And so Zaccaeus was forced to climb a tree if he was to see Jesus, hated so much that he dare not even stand in their crowd. But Jesus declared this excluded outcast as someone who belonged, who could again be called a son of Abraham. And what I find fascinating in his story is that this did not require of Jesus some great miracle. The gospel records do not even say if any other words were exchanged, except that Jesus invited that most simple yet profound act of human connection. He shared his table and sat down with him for a meal. Yet in that act of accepting another's hospitality, another's place was restored within God's family. So, as we journey through Lent in the shadow of the cross, even if we feel abandoned and outcast by the world in which we find ourselves, even if circumstances leave us wondering where we truly belong, Jesus declares our identity as a child of God, loved beyond measure, one with whom he will share a table. And as those called to follow his example, this might simply require that we too are prepared to refuse to call another stranger, to see beyond what they are to what they might become, if we, in his name, might simply be willing to sit at their table.